Boom!
And Budo.
This is your host, Zainil Fuego, the Christ Pneumatologist, and
I am Lady Katsura, the Christ Coach, or your Christ Mentor.
welcome to the debut of the Life Mindset Mentorcast. All right, in light of the world pandemic and other world crises, there has been significant surge in stress, anxiety, fear, depression, and the like. We are beginning this podcast to actually assist and to give you the practical spiritual tools that you need every week to very practically dominate stress, anxiety, fear, and depression. This podcast is designed to give you the basic components of a powerful mindset, which is what we see the world needs. We make it as easy as ABC for more life, more peace, more power.
More power. A third of Americans are actually showing signs of clinical anxiety or depression. The Census Bureau data shows that this is the most definitive and alarming sign yet of the psychological toll caused by the coronavirus pandemic. When asked questions normally used to screen patients for mental health problems, 24% showed clinically significant symptoms of major depressive disorder, and 30% showed symptoms of generalized anxiety disorder.
And as a result of the world pandemic, that has actually gone up to 50% and
Wow.
more. So, what is anxiety? Anxiety is the body's response to worry and fear. Anxiety is not that simple, as there is a wide range of how deeply anxiety affects people and to what extent it interferes with their quality of life. There is a multitude of anxiety disorders that can cause anxiety, worry, stress due to social interactions, personal health, work, relationships, marriages, finances, or even a particular phobia.
Indeed. So here at the Zinke Ketura International Institute of Pneumatology, research has revealed that the mindset from which all the prophets, priests, Christ Jesus, and even the apostles of Christ functioned in is called the self-existent mindset. From this mindset flows the power of life in healing, mental peace, and of course, emotional health. We now refer to this mindset as self existent psychology. It is simply the logic of living from within, from your heart, where the spirit resides.
Now, the Genesis narrative of the Holy Bible narrates that man was created in the image and likeness of God, right? Made to function from the nature of God's spirit or Elohim's spirit and from within himself. But man made a decision to abandon the nature of his own spirit to use external reference points to determine who he is, what his potential is, what his limitations are. He compared himself to a tree and dressed himself with the leaves, trying to be in the image and likeness of something external of himself. The research at the Zinke International Institute of Pneumatology has revealed and has confirmed that this is the human condition that results in fear, anxiety, depression, stress, sadness, and all negative emotions. We have coined it identity codependency. What is identity codependency? Identity codependency is simply the use of people, things, and circumstances to validate oneself, to authenticate oneself, to make decisions, and for personal self-approval. In the absence of what is used to authenticate, validate, or approve oneself, negative emotions arise as the source of our life and inspiration and security is perceived to be absent. This is actually what leads to feelings of inadequacy, depression, panic, anxiety, fear, cognitive paralysis, and a range of other negative emotions. So we start this life mindset mentorcast to bring this into perspective for all who are interested and who would like to eliminate stress, anxiety, depression, feelings of inadequacy, fear, this cognitive paralysis, and the range of negative emotions.
So, as you mentioned, all of these things, right? These negative emotions and so on. Basically, can we say that all of that can basically fit under the category of anxiety?
Yeah, well, anxiety is actually just one of the more natural responses to where whatever you're using for inspiration, for
Mm-hmm.
security, and to live life is threatened or is actually absent.
Right, because you did mention that it's just the body's response, as you were saying there, to worry and fear. So I'm sure that some of our listeners can probably relate to the feeling of anxiety. It's quite normal. A lot of us experience it if we are not aware of how to govern it. So
Right.
then, what would you say in this podcast? We are going to identify then some of these steps or things that we can do to help eliminate the stress and anxiety. A lot of people are feeling overwhelmed right now because of the pandemic, and we understand well if it's just the body's response to this, then it's a matter of learning how to take authority over it. Would you say, yeah?
Well, definitely. What we have here is because of actually what most people are accustomed to, um, especially in light of the pandemic, when this pandemic arose, changes took place dramatically,
Mm-hmm.
which means, for example, people were accustomed to a certain ritual with regards to relationships.
Right.
They were accustomed to their own ritual to actually earn money, to live securely, to pay
Mm-hmm.
rent, to pay their mortgages, to actually generate finances or have some sort of income to even feed themselves and their families. Yeah, this also affected relationships where people were not married. For those who were married, they may have actually had a ritual where they were constantly going to work and they see each other at a particular time. And the pandemic and the global crises actually caused a dramatic shift where even with relationships and marriages, people were spending more time together than they have ever spent in the relationship.
Exactly. And of course, now with the children at home.
And with regards to families, you have had the children now at home 24/7, and
Mm-hmm.
parents were not accustomed to that. Then you also have where they were not married people, boyfriend and girlfriend, and because of the quarantine and the measures and so on, it became more difficult for persons to meet each other, so they're not seeing each other. On a social level, everybody was actually accustomed to going places, enjoying certain atmospheres, and then suddenly everything just cut out.
Yes.
Right now, there
Just
are various amount of complications that have come with this that is actually resulting in all of these negative emotions that we spoke about, from anxiety to panic attacks to fear to a sense of inadequacy. Because a lot of the things that persons have been using for security in life has just, in a snap of a finger, just turned around.
exactly.
All right. So what we want to do here is actually to present three very simple steps, because most people are experiencing these things and have never really stopped and thought about what is really causing this. And so today, what we're going to do is actually just take a look at three simple steps that can dramatically and a very powerful way of eliminating this anxiety.
All right. Let's dive into it.
All right. Now, so due to the sense of feeling like one is not enough, what tends to happen? What when I say one is not enough, whatever is there that you're using for security or for inspiration or for a sense of personal value, authentication, validation, self-worth,
Mm-hmm.
strength, because that is taken away or even threatened, one tends to seek self-authentication by pursuing what they perceive they lack to be able to feel what we just mentioned.
Right. So, like in the case, if we were to use an example of what you're saying, in the cases where people's incomes were affected
Right.
because of the pandemic, of course, would you say that unknowingly, probably unconsciously, if that is actually weighing on your mind to the extent where you're feeling stressed and overwhelmed, Notwithstanding that it is important, of course, to sustain your family, that you may have been using that to authenticate yourself.
Well, to a great extent, but that is with regards to identity.
Mhm.
But then on the other hand, you have where that has been affected and it is affecting one's security with regards to where you live, what you're
Right.
going to eat tomorrow, right? So what you're basically looking at here is everyone has been very much accustomed to living through, as I mentioned earlier on, a particular method of actually guaranteeing the security or or validating themselves,
Okay.
right? And that you can pretty much classify as a logic. How they knew whatever they were doing is actually how they knew to get what they wanted. And now, with regards to the dramatic changes, what the natural reaction is, according to scriptures, according to the Hebrew Bible, what the natural reaction is because of the absence of what you were using to build your security or secure yourself, or on the other hand, what you were using for the strength of your identity, it's now removed. And the logic that applied can no longer work. And so anxiety, fear, depression, a sense of inadequacy is a natural response to the fact that your logic is no longer applicable for the present situation.
Okay.
So what we basically need to do is to identify that logic is no longer applicable, and there must be new and different ways that must be identified to create a new logic to actually do the same amidst the present circumstances. It's that simple.
Right.
All right. So, as I mentioned just now, when the possession of what they perceive they lack is threatened or taken away, the natural reaction is that stress, the anxiety, the fear. And in
I
some cases,
noticed.
if it is lost completely, or it perceives through the logic that they were accustomed using, it is unattainable. The natural reaction is depression, sadness. You see?
No, I was saying I noticed that you're using the natural reaction, and I think that's really interesting because a lot of people tend to put massive labels behind this natural reaction and over or make it, as a matter of fact, like an obsession,
Exactly. And
anxiety disorder, and treat it like it's something huge when in reality it's just a matter of learning how to manage it,
yeah,
manage this reaction.
for most people in particular, because of the lack of the knowledge of what the scriptures actually indicate, they have actually gone on to identify it as a disorder or a sickness, an infirmity, when it is actually something that is natural when your logic is challenged.
I love how you put that.
Yeah. So the first step
Hmm.
that we, the first step that would be first, well, that is actually necessary in this case, is that one must make a decision to be true to what they think and feel, what they really think and feel. Be
All
true
right.
to your heart. Be honest. Which
Don't try
means
to hide it and pretend like
exactly
you got this and the change has come and I can master this. No need for all of that.
right. So the first thing that you want to do is, because you are spirit and you are energy, the first thing that you want to do is to confess that you are actually feeling this. Be true to what you truly think, what you truly feel. Because most of the times that energy is actually coming from your heart, and your heart in particular, or your, when I say your heart, your spirit, your energy, it's coming from there, because your logic, as I mentioned, is challenged.
Uh-huh.
And so to try to quiet it, which is what most people try to do through various means, is not going to deal with the issue. It's pretty much going to suppress it for some time. But then the presence of that energy and all of that emotion causes even further physiological changes on the body.
Right.
Right? So you want to identify it and be real. Express what you feel. That's the first step. Yeah. The second step is to become aware of the fact that in this case, you were never meant to compare yourself to others or to other things. That is in the case where your identity, where you've been using whatever you may have had for strength of identity, right? That sense of lack usually comes in with a comparison with something external of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You
So
are
it's
think.
sometimes
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes, like I see people go through anxiety for finances, where any cases where like the needs and so on are being met, but in their heart they're secretly comparing to a friend or a co-worker who has more, probably a better vehicle, and the anxiousness builds up because they think that they need to get that vehicle to be considered someone who is valuable or to add
Ac-
value to themselves.
accepted, yeah.
Yeah,
Somebody who is authenticated as being as getting by in life, as
and successful,
successful and doing well. On the
right?
other hand, you may have persons who may have lost their job and now they actually found themselves in a position where you are you are not feeling secure about your residence, where you're living, and what you're going to eat today or tomorrow. And in that context, what you're basically looking at here is simply we come back to the change to just identify, simply to identify that the logic that you are using to earn finances is no longer applicable. It's now challenged.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, you were not meant to depend on one logic or to be functioning codependently on that, but to actually reorientate that to the fact that all you need is a new logic, which simply means you need information, find out what is available, and actually formulate a new logic to get the same task accomplished.
Wow, that seems rather simple. I mean,
It's
I
very
think about it.
it's extremely simple.
If you were to think about it with like children, for example, growing up, when we move from one grade to another grade, I remember growing up, there was a sense of anxiety that came with the change of class because now you're being challenged beyond what you think you can accomplish. And
Exactly.
when we change the logic and look back, the grade, let's say we moved from second grade to third grade, no longer was something that was still your anxiety because you're now functioning from a different logic in that grade.
Mm-hmm. Now, this also applies to relationships
Hmm.
because a lot of people actually found themselves, whether in the pandemic or prior to the pandemic, a lot of relationship problems comes from two people actually in a relationship and they're functioning from two very different definitions and expectations of what a relationship is.
Right.
Definition of what a relationship is and different expectations in the actual connection. Which means where there is not where the relationship what doesn't seem to be working out, it is not functioning in the way that it should. What is actually also identifying is that your logic is being challenged. The logic that you're using
Hmm.
is actually proving itself to be not functional. And instead of actually trying to condemn or to control the other party to do what you want them to do, a new logic must be established.
This is indeed powerful. As the title says, the most powerful way to eliminate stress. I
Mm,
can definitely relate to its power already because, I mean, things like medicine, for example, as you rightfully saying a while ago, suppress the heart, the feeling. You take the medicine for the anxiety, and when it wears off, you still feel it. It comes back on like a raging fire because you
right.
haven't really addressed the logic.
Exactly.
So this
Exactly.
definitely, I can see how it's a game changer.
Yeah. So in the context of if you are whatever you've been using because you've been trying to give yourself or you've been using for a sense of self value,
Mhm.
self approval, self validation, self authentication. You, if you've been doing that, the second step that we're talking about here is actually identifying that you are not validated by anything external. I
Right.
I actually propose that for persons who are listening to this, if you've been If you're suffering from anxiety and stress because what you've been using for a sense of self worth, self validation, self approval is challenged or it's not present anymore. And that could be with regards to money, possessions, where you're living, how you're living, depending on your spouse in particular, to validate you, to give you a sense of self approval, or even your family, looking for approval from family and friends.
Mm-hmm.
I strongly encourage you. I strongly encourage you to stop and to consider that these things. It is unwise to validate yourself with things external of you and give them the responsibility of validating you when they themselves in particular may have problems with validating themselves.
Right. I mean, and whose life is it, right? Is it theirs or yours?
Exactly. And when you're trying to actually be validated by others, what you simply do is you begin to subject yourself to their logic, and therefore you are not living your life. You've now begun to live theirs.
This is powerful.
Yeah. So in this case, I encourage persons to consider. And I propose a new thought. Your existence and your breath of life, your life, being alive, is your validation. I want to say that again. Your existence and your life, being alive, is your sufficiency, despite the opinions of others.
Hmm.
All right? Your being alive validates you, just like being alive validates them. Now, even though they may be looking for things to give themselves a sense of self approval, being alive is your self approval.
Thought
In the,
provoking.
in the scriptures, that is actually referred to as the spirit of life, the Holy Spirit, the breath of life. He is actually your validation. If I take it outside the scriptures, that will be just being alive validates you. Your existence validates you. Yeah.
Good.
And on the other hand, that's on one side. On the other
Mm-hmm.
hand, if your security is threatened, all you need is a new logic.
On your logic. So what we're gonna do, because what you shared is powerful. It's mind blowing. It definitely deserves some thought and reflection. So what we're gonna do is pause for a quick break, and when we return, we will continue with the steps that you're sharing. You are listening to the Life Mindset Mentorcast, the podcast that gives you the tools that you need every week to very practically dominate stress, anxiety, fear, and depression. Verified by pragmatic and experimental research of the Zinke Kitsura International Institute of Pneumatology. We give you the basic components of a powerful mindset. We make it as easy as A, B, C. You can also find content by seeing Anketuro through www.internationalinstituteofpneumatology.com. To access weekly episodes of this podcast, other resources, and mentorship, become a Silver Star member at www.patreon.com/scene_L_fuego. More life, more peace, more power. So before we went on the break, you were sharing with us something that probably people are hearing for the first time, our beloved members and listeners, that your life, your breath is sufficient. That
Yeah.
definitely is a new thought that is put out there
Hmm.
as it relates to, of course, anxiety. And I can see now, understanding that thought, that when you live from that, you're living from your breath, from what's within. There's no need to look at things, people, and feel insufficient, because a lot of us people, we pursue things because we
Right.
think we need it to make us better people in society, or we
Exactly.
think that we need it to be considered successful. And this does not diminish the fact that, of course, these things are in some cases necessities, and they serve a particular purpose, but their function is not to add value to us.
Right. Yeah. So let's just actually just recap the first two steps that we
Hmm.
covered in the first half of the episode. The first step is to be real, be true to yourself, be true to your heart,
Right.
be true to what you really think and feel, express what you truly think and feel. The second step, I label it reorientate. So if you are one of those that are actually using external reference points, whether it be people's opinions, how they talk to you, finances, um, possessions, social status, fame, recognition, if you've been using any of these external reference points or ideas for the strength of your identity to feel a sense of self value and self worth, self authentication, consider what I propose that you consider that you are reoriented by considering that you being alive, your existence and being alive is your validation, is your authentication, validates your self worth, just like it validates all things.
Yeah.
Right? Every animal is validated by its mere existence. And if you on the other hand, your security has been threatened, whether it's been financially or the security of a relationship and so on, consider that all that is revealing to you is that your logic, your present logic, is not equipped to accomplish the goal,
Hmm.
which means you need to reorientate, seek new information, to have a new logic to get the task done in a different way. Right? That applies to finances, it applies to relationships, it applies to your um, income, it applies to those things. And now the third step, it's very important, thirdly, that you, in this case, be real. All right, the third step is really an extension of number two. Be real. So you see, there's in two steps that we actually dealt with that anxiety there. But the third one in particular is to identify every area that you feel a sense of lack by actually paying attention to what you have been pursuing in life. Right? And begin to look at them independent of yourself. The things that are actually stressing you right now, causing you anxiety and pain and stress, sorry, you're feeling anxious.
Hmm.
What I encourage you to do is step number three is to begin to identify what they are. Like identify the things that you desire to feel peaceful, to feel a sense of self-worth, and to feel a sense of security. The only reason you're feeling that is because you are actually attached to it and you're treating it as part of yourself.
Yeah.
And if it's part of yourself, you losing it is actually a feeling of you end up feeling a sense of losing yourself.
Wow.
So I encourage you to stop looking at it as part of yourself and imagine each and every one of those things independent of you. In the same way you go to a park and watch a tree and observe the tree and admire the tree, but you're seeing the tree, you are a spectator of the tree.
Yeah.
I encourage our listeners to view the different things in your life in the same way. Spectate it. Stop looking at it as part of yourself. Step back and spectate it. You cannot reorientate or intelligently come to solutions if you are actually trying to do that as an extension of yourself. You can only reorientate or manage that which is independent of you.
Right. I can confirm my experience with this as a very real one, with parenting especially. And the same number three that you said is an extension of number two.
Right.
For me in particular, being a parent, when I applied it and look at the management of the children independent of me and not as an attachment through the lens of that attachment, it was much way easier to
Right.
govern. without
Yeah.
feeling the tension and the stress. I mean, I applied all the different steps, but I just would like to share with our listeners that that's something is my personal experience, and I can tell you that it definitely shifted. It made a shift in the whole schematics.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, and then let's end this episode with this simple thought
Mhm.
for those who are actually listening to this to eliminate stress. Those the first 2 points alone, as and those 3 points will powerfully and very dramatically change your perspective and your experience. And so I wanted to leave with this: stress, anxiety arises as a result of being managed by something instead of you managing the thing.
Ooh, deep.
Stress and anxiety arises because what you're looking at is really controlling and managing you and managing how you respond, managing your atmosphere and your circumstances. Each and every person here has, on the scriptural side, you are Christ on earth, God in flesh, and therefore nothing manages you. You are meant to manage it. The moment you understand that and begin to approach things as independent of you and begin to manage it as an independent entity, whether it's
Mhm.
finances, your relationship, your family relationships, your your income, finding a job, your business as an entrepreneur. Once you begin to manage it as an independent entity, then stress will fall off, because what you're doing is simply managing managing it according to what is necessary. And if that means that a change of logic is in order, then that can be easily effected.
That is so deep. Yeah. And so, our members, if you would like to experience more, to those who are listening, rather, if you would like to experience more and you have situations where you're struggling to manage the stress and the information has been helpful, but you still would just like a little bit more mentorship on it, join us on Patreon, become a Silver Star member, and we'll help you go through it step by step.
Yeah. So this podcast in particular will be our weekly podcast. Um, we are actually making this episode public, but this podcast will be a weekly podcast. And so we're making this one public, but if you would like to follow up with the weekly podcast, the other podcasts that are actually coming on a weekly basis, come to Patreon, www.patreon.com/Zane_Ale_Fuego. Become a Silver Star member, as Keturah mentioned. And we will also be doing workshops as well as provide other resources to help you along the way. Right?
More life.
We also are providing mentorship. So if you desire to be mentored, and we also offer laser coaching, which is simply where we can actually have targeted calls. We're
Mhm.
offering targeted calls to actually identify areas that you are stressed and bring it into perspective and set you along the path of a solution, whether we reorientate what you're using to validate yourself, give you a practical step-by-step way to reorientate your self-worth, your self-validation, your self-authentication, your self-approval. And if it is security, practical steps to reorientate your logic, to identify the logic that you've been using as the logic that may be challenged, and to set you on the course of a new logic.
Sounds good. Don't forget to join us. You will experience more life, more power, and more peace.
Yeah, so this is Zainal Fuego, the Christ pneumatologist, and
I am Lady Keturah, your Christ mentor.
the mindset the life mindset mentorcast. Stay tuned and look forward. More life, more peace, more power.